Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for March the 20th. Today we are reading together the 35th Psalm. Psalm number 34 is titled A Prayer for Victory, and we are told that this is of David, not given any other details concerning any sort of background context that might have been known about this psalm, which might have caused this psalm to be written. Certainly, we're going to note really quickly that David is speaking about a situation in which he has many opponents and enemies, and we're going to see that he has he has multiple requests, I guess we should say, for how God might deal with the enemies and the opponents that David finds himself up against. So let's read this here in Psalm number 35. Let me get the text up on the screen. There we go. Psalm number 35 and verse number 1. Psalm 35 and verse number 1. Psalm 35, verse number 1. Oppose my opponents, Yahweh. Fight those who fight me. Take your shields, large and small, and come to my aid. Draw the spear and the javelin against my pursuers, and assure me, I am your deliverance. Let those who intend to take my life be disgraced and humiliated. Let those who plan to harm me be turned back and ashamed. Let them be like chaff in the winds, with the angel of Yahweh driving them away. Let their way be dark and slippery, with the angel of Yahweh pursuing them. They hid their net for me without cause. They dug a pit for me without cause. Yet, or let ruin come on him unexpectedly, and let the nets that he hid ensnare him. Let him fall into it, to his ruin. Then I will rejoice in Yahweh. I will delight in his deliverance. All my bones will say, Yahweh, who is like you? Rescuing the poor from the one too strong for him, the poor or the needy from one who robs him. Malicious witnesses come forward. They question me about things I do not know. They repay me evil for good, making me desolate. Yet, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine. I went about mourning as if for my friend or brother. I was bowed down in grief, like one mourning for a mother. But when I stumbled, they gathered in glee. They gathered against me. Assailants I did not know tore me and did not stop. With godless mockery, they gnashed their teeth. Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages. Rescue my precious life from the young lions. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will exalt you among many people. Do not let my deceitful enemies rejoice over me. Do not let those who hate me without cause wink at me maliciously, for they do not speak in friendly ways, but contrive fraudulent schemes against those who live peacefully in the land. They open their mouths wide against me and say, Aha, aha, we saw it. You saw it, Yahweh. Do not be silent. Lord, do not be far from me. Wake up and rise to my defense, to my cause, my God and my Lord. Vindicate me, Yahweh, my God, in keeping with your righteousness, and do not let them rejoice over me. Do not let them say in their hearts, Aha, just what we wanted. Do not let them say, We have swallowed him up. Let those who rejoice at my misfortune be disgraced and humiliated. Let those who exalt themselves over me be clothed with shame and reproach. Let those who want my vindication shout for joy and be glad. Let them continually say, Yahweh be exalted. He takes pleasure in his servants' well being, and my tongue will proclaim your righteousness, your praise all day long. Psalm number 35, prayer for victory. If we're going to classify this psalm, I think it would be appropriate to classify this psalm as one of the, we'll say, somewhat controversial, well discussed imprecatory psalms. An imprecatory psalm. What does the word imprecatory mean? It's actually a good question. I think I want to look that up real fast. I mean, I know what an imprecatory psalm is, but I wonder what the what the actual definition of the word is. Let's see here. Imprecatory or imprecation would be the word for it. This word means, okay, so this word means a curse. So it would be considered a cursing psalm. And again, I think we see why. Verses 1 through 3 detail David's conflict that he is involved in. War language is used to describe his issues here, and really the principle of lex talionis comes into play here. The idea of like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that you would repay somebody in accordance with their misdeeds. So notice the language here in verse number 1. Oppose my opponents. So they are opposing me. So Yahweh oppose them. Fight those who fight me. They're fighting me. So Yahweh fight against them. Take your shields, large and small. Come to my aid. Draw the spear and the javelin against my pursuers, and assure me I am your deliverance. So obviously there is some sort of conflict that David is involved in here. And these first 8 verses or so are going to be his prayer for deliverance from Yahweh against his oppressors. So notice the language that he uses in verses 4 through 8 of his desire for his enemies to be really hindered. I think this would be the idea of verses 4 through 8, that they would be hindered from success against David. Let those who intend to take my life be disgraced and humiliated. Let them be turned back and ashamed. Let them be like chaff in the wind, meaning having no weight, having no strength. Let their way be dark and slippery. Verses 5 and 6 especially bring in the angel of Yahweh, who was mentioned in the last psalm in verse number 7, where there the angel of Yahweh is spoken of as being for those and rescuing those who belong to God. Here we see the other side of the coin of the angel of Yahweh, who's often described in many ways as a warrior, where now he is against the enemy. So in chapter, or in Psalm 34, he is for God's people. In Psalm 35 verses 5 and 6, he is against the enemies of God's people, again driving them away, letting their way be dark and slippery. So as the angel of Yahweh is pursuing them, they're on a dark and slippery path. They don't know where they're going. Really, they are hindered from any sort of real success. Now notice verses 7 and 8. David details for us kind of the issue here that's going on with this conflict. They hid their net from me without cause. Notice that, without cause. So it's not like this is some sort of just warfare, it seems. No, this is them being against David without cause. They hid their net for me without cause. They dug a pit for me without cause. So here is David's request them. Then let ruin come on him unexpectedly, and let the net that he hid ensnare him. Let him fall into it to his ruin. Here really is, again, the principle of lex talionis, that he did this misdeed. Yahweh let his misdeed come back to bite him instead of harming me. So that's the request, verses 1 through 8. And then verses 9 and 10, when God does bring deliverance, when he does this, then I will rejoice in Yahweh. I will delight in his deliverance. All my bones will say, Yahweh, who is like you? No one else rescues the poor from one too strong for him. No one else rescues the poor or the needy from those who rob him. Yahweh, you alone bring deliverance. That's why I'm coming to you. That's David's point here. I'm coming to you because you alone bring deliverance. I've got nowhere else to turn. I turn to you and you alone. Beginning of verse number 10, we see seemingly some more detail about the enemy of David, that they have brought forth malicious witnesses against him. I would think those would qualify as being contrary to the 9th great command of not bearing false witness. They ask questions I don't know. They repay me evil for good, making me desolate. David goes on to talk about how he actually showed kindness to his opponents. When they were sick, I did the proper and culturally accepted mourning practices. I took on sackcloth. I humbled myself in fasting. I genuinely prayed for their well-being. I mourned for them as if it was a friend or a brother. I was bowed down in grief like one mourning for a mother. Here David is saying, I showed legitimate, heartfelt kindness and graciousness toward them, but they did not do that. They did not show the same type of kindness. When I stumbled, they gathered in glee. They gathered against me. Again, assailants I did not know tore at me and did not stop. With godless mockery, they gnashed their teeth at me. Here is David using his words to pray on their behalf. But instead, they only use their words to tear David down. And David rightfully is hurt by that. So, how long then, Lord, will you look on? Here's David's request: rescue me, rescue my precious life. And if you do that, here's my request to rescue. My request is for you to rescue me. And when you do that, again, David here is fully confident in Yahweh giving him rescue. So when you do that, I will praise you in the great assembly. I will exalt you among many people. Do not let my enemies rejoice over me. Do not let those who hate me without cause wink at me maliciously. They do not speak in friendly ways. They contrive fraudulent schemes. And they do that against those who are living peacefully in the land. Again, this is not some sort of just warfare, it seems. This is malicious in nature. They open their mouths wide against me and say, aha, aha, we saw it. They're taunting David. They're acting like they've seen something that makes David worthy of whatever it is they're doing against him. But I want you to contrast the end of verse 21 with the beginning of verse 22. Aha, aha, we saw it, as if they saw something that was truly worthwhile seeing. But David says in verse 22, actually, you saw it. Yahweh, you saw it. You see everything, and you know that there's nothing they have on me. So do not be silent. Do not be far from me. Wake up, rise up, vindicate me in keeping with your righteousness. This is important here. Notice something that I think is of utmost importance within this psalm is verse number 24. Vindicate me, Yahweh my God, in keeping with your righteousness. In keeping with your righteousness. We're going to come back to that here in just a moment. Do not let them rejoice over me. Again, is the idea at the end of verse 24. We saw that already. Verse number 19. Do not let them say in their hearts, aha, just what we wanted. Do not let them say, we have swallowed him up. Let those who rejoice at my misfortune, again, be disgraced and humiliated. We've seen this already. Verse number 4. Be disgraced and humiliated. Let those who exalt themselves over me be clothed with shame and reproach. So again, David here very clearly is praying for a curse to be upon his enemies. And that might be kind of troublesome to some folks. So how can he do this? Are we not told to love our enemies and even pray for our enemies? Well, of course, those things are true. And here's the thing, they were true under the law of Moses as well. They were to love their neighbors and even love the stranger. They weren't just to go around killing people indiscriminately or hating people indiscriminately. There was always a reason behind any sort of violence that was carried out against another person, and often that was two reasons why. It was either punishment for paganism often, or it was following the prescriptions of the law for punishment against certain sins. So how can David here pray for these things, pray a curse against his enemies? I think it's back this. Another aspect of the law is they were not to take personal vengeance. In fact, Paul quotes that in Romans chapter 12, that you don't seek vengeance for yourselves, for vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. So what David is doing here, I believe, is he is simply praying for God to carry out justice. He's praying for God to recognize here are wicked people who are against your people. And the reality is that if somebody is against Yahweh's people, they are against Yahweh. You can't separate the two things. You cannot be against Yahweh's people and not be against Yahweh. And in the same way, somebody cannot be against Yahweh, and we as Yahweh's people not take that seriously as well. The two are interconnected. They're one and the same in this context. If you're against Yahweh's people, specifically if you're against Yahweh's anointed king, you're against Yahweh. And David recognizes that. And David recognizes there's justice that needs to be carried out in that as well. But notice again, David is going to Yahweh to carry this out. David's not pursuing it himself. He's asking Yahweh to carry out this justice. And here's the thing, we might do the same thing. We might pray to Yahweh that he carry out justice against evil people. But, God might not do that. Maybe we're mistaken about them being evil. Maybe we're mistaken about them, what they're doing, not being against the will of God. I'm just speaking here, very generally speaking, very, very general in my application here. But what that shows though, and the point I'm trying to make is Yahweh knows. God knows. We don't know. That's why we don't seek our own vengeance, because we don't know if that's proper or necessary sometimes. But God always knows. He always knows absolutely what is necessary in any particular situation. That's why we leave it up to Him for justice. That's why we leave it up to Him to take care of the evildoer, because He knows absolutely. He judges perfectly. We don't necessarily do that. So it's a very serious thing to consider carrying out justice. So for David here, he then said, he says all this about the evildoer. He states very strongly why they're wrong and what wrongs they have done. But then he turns around and considers those who were on his side and those who were praying for him and supporting him. Those who want my vindication, let them shout for joy and be glad. Let them continually say, Yahweh be exalted. He takes pleasure in his servants' well-being. Notice again, this all gets back to verse 24. We'll connect verse 24 to verse number 27. What is this about? Is this just about David? No, it's about Yahweh at the end of the day. It's about him being righteous. It's about him being exalted. It's about him carrying out justice. Yahweh be exalted in this, not David. Let Yahweh's righteousness be seen, not David's. Let his justice be seen, not David's, but Yahweh's. Yahweh is the one who's going to carry this out at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, whenever David considers all these things, my tongue will proclaim your righteousness. Because God's justice is married to his righteousness. They cannot be separated. They are the same. Or they're not the same, but they are connected and intertwined with one another. They're built upon one another. God's righteousness is manifested in his justice. So as David here proclaims and prays for his enemies to be defeated, again, what does it all get back to? It all gets back to, this is not about David's vengeance. He's not trying to carry it out himself. He's letting God. It's about God's justice and righteousness and holiness being upheld. And really, if you fight against God's people, you're fighting against God. And he takes that very seriously. If you have any questions or comments here about Psalm 35, I know it is a difficult psalm to think about the reality of imprecatory psalms, but if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. And I appreciate you taking some time reading along with me today. Just remember, if we have those who are against God, I think this text shows us pretty clearly that we can pray for them to be stopped. Yes, we should pray for their salvation as well. We should pray that they might stop because they recognize the evil that their actions are carrying out. But again, considering this psalm and other psalms, I don't see any reason for us not to pray that evil would be stopped. Again, recognizing that God is the one who will uphold justice in the end. And we simply want for goodness and righteousness to be seen in this world, certainly not evil and malicious, wicked behavior that harms God's people, that harms God's creation, or that harms the cause of God in whatever way it might be. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Looking forward to seeing everybody tonight for our Bible study at 7. And then we will be back at it on Friday, reading together from Psalm number 36, Human Wickedness and God's Love. A very interesting psalm. I'm looking forward to reading that with you then. Take care and God bless.